Hello, welcome to New Wave Global. You're watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. Tonight, we examine a dramatic recalibration, or perhaps a full blown reconfiguration of South Asia's geopolitical triangle, so to speak, unfolding in Washington, D.C. In recent days, President Donald Trump has loudly turned on India, his so called strategic partner, whose leader Narendra Modi, may I remind you, once called President Trump my friend Dolan Trump. And President Trump has in turn called him several times his personal friend. But now he has accused India of being a bad trade partner, an economy in shambles, a dead economy, to paraphrase, and has repeatedly targeted the country's continued purchases of Russian oil, criticizing India for fueling the Russian war machine. On July the 30th, he announced a 25% tariff on India's imports, citing national security concerns. Then, on August 6th, just yesterday, he escalated it to 50%, further exacerbating bilateral tensions. In parallel, President Trump has claimed credit for the ceasefire that halted the May conflict between Pakistan and India when India attacked Pakistan, implying it was his deal making rather than bilateral diplomacy that brought the hostilities to a close. Contrast this with his posture towards Pakistan. In mid June, President Trump hosted Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir for a rare luncheon at the White House. The first time, may I remind, a US president has formally received Pakistan's top military officer, who's not the president of Pakistan, unaccompanied by civilian leaders. Uh, Trump praised General Munir as very impressive, thanking him for helping prevent a war with India, noting two very smart people decided not to keep going with that war. Beyond that praise, President Trump has remained reticent without publicly outlining any concrete outcome from the meeting. Official US statements have limited themselves to expressing appreciation for Pakistan's role in regional stability and broader counterterrorism cooperation. The questions that I shall raise in today's episode are: has the US decided to wash its hands off of Asia and contain China policy? And what are Washington's reasons for cozying up to Pakistan? Is this transactional outreach or a deeper strategic pivot in Washington's South Asia policy? To help unpack this, I'm joined tonight by Michael Kugelman, one of the most incisive analysts of US South Asia policy. Welcome back, Michael, to Unraveled, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be back here with you, and thanks for the kind introduction.
So let me start with this. What factors, in your view, are driving President Trump's increasingly confrontational stance towards India?
Yeah, I think that there's several factors at play here. One is that Trump 2.0 is a lot more hardline than Trump 1.0 when it comes to the lengths that the president is willing to go to secure and protect U.S. economic interests. So this time around, unlike during his first term, he is perfectly comfortable applying maximum pressure tactics, including punishment against those countries, including U.S. allies and partners that he feels are undercutting U.S. economic interest. And for quite some time, President Trump has been uncomfortable with India's tariffs. It's almost like it's been an obsession, going back to his first term, and then more recently on the election campaign trail last year, describing India as a tariff king. So I think one factor is that he's just been more willing to take the most dramatic steps to try to get countries to take steps that would better advance U.S. economic interests. So that includes reducing the large tariffs that India has. So that's one factor. The second factor, I would argue, is the Russia factor. President Trump has, historically, he's not come across someone who's really hostile to Russia. He's signaled his admiration for Vladimir Putin in the past, but he came to office really wanting to end the war in the Ukraine, wanting to be the one that ends the war so that he could compete once again for a Nobel Peace Prize. He has called on Putin to stop fighting and agreeing to a ceasefire. Putin has rejected those calls. So I think that Trump is trying to raise the pressure on Russia by trying to pressure close commercial partners of Russia to back away from their commercial partnerships with Russia. And India, of course, is a very close partner of Russia, is a close commercial partner and a close partner on the whole. So I think that's another factor there. So Trump hopes that by applying these tariffs on India, that India will feel compelled to stop importing Russian energy and even Russian weaponry. The third factor, then final factor that I'll highlight, and this perhaps gets into a bit more speculative stuff, but I think it's worth highlighting. I think that Trump feels aggrieved by India and the Indian government. I think that it's become personal for him. My sense is that he's very unhappy that the Indian government did not let him take credit for his role in the India-Pakistan ceasefire. I also think he didn't respond well to a call that he had with Modi some weeks ago when, according to the Indian readout, it was a long call, and Modi, for a long time, told Trump that various positions that Trump has taken are not right, including his claims of playing a role in the ceasefire. And Trump, given who he is, he probably doesn't like getting talked to for such a long time by another leader. So I think it's a combination of different factors that have brought us to where we are. Indeed, though, it's a stunner in the sense that the U.S.-India relationship was very strong during the first Trump years. There was reason to believe the relationship would only get better with Trump back in office because he wouldn't be worried about India's human rights record or democracy. That type of concern is something that upsets the India. And so there, Modi was one of the first foreign leaders to be invited to the White House in his second term. You had the external affairs minister say, well, many countries are nervous about the new government in the U.S. We're not. A lot of confidence. Clearly, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, but I recall that during the campaign trail, President Trump was not very, I mean, he gave out signals criticizing India, and, uh, he expressed his intention to increase the tariff on India. So there was, at least on 2 to 3 occasions, President Trump, the candidate Trump, spoke about India, which was not very positive. So some people, there's the in the gossip chambers in DC, some people say that candidate Trump actually felt slighted by Prime Minister Modi, for giving so much time to President Biden at that time. Do you think there's, that feeling of being insulted or being slighted is lingering on and is responsible for much of what is happening?
Yeah, you raise a good point. I had spoken to this question of Trump perhaps feeling aggrieved by India's actions since he returned to the presidency. But you're right. There could be lingering baggage, grievances that he's nursed from earlier on. Absolutely, that's a strong possibility. Um, and it's clear that not only Biden but also Barack Obama had a pretty good relationship with Modi, and Modi liked to be with them. So yeah, I mean that could certainly be a part of it. But then again, as I said before, Trump invited Modi to the White House soon after he took office. And my understanding is that the meetings went very well. There was a lot of chemistry, and the two men, or Trump, looked very happy wanting to work with Modi. So you're right, there could be some grievances harbored from the past, but I really think that if we are going to say that a lot of what's happening with Trump and his actions toward India, if it's driven by the personal factor and him taking things personally, being unhappy, I really think that much of that has originated in what's happened over the last few months since he took office the second time.
Yeah, that seems because yeah, I think you are right. But another thing comes to mind, Michael, that whatever these factors may be, you have highlighted three very important factors. Now, keeping all of them in view, do you think, y- if all of them are at play, President Trump has, started this tirade with India. Um, doesn't it seem like it's too much of a cost to pay for, losing India to all of these three factors, while India has been a bulwark against China in the region? So, do you think it will impact the larger geopolitical policy, US policy? And why sacrificing such an important partner? I mean, these three factors very important, but are they worth sacrificing an important partner as important as India?
Yeah, I mean, I think in principle, the answer would be yes, that it's much too high a cost to bear to alienate India, this partner that, as you say, for strategic reasons has been viewed as very significant by Washington because of its willingness to work with the US to counter China. But things are very different now, right? The president and really the administration have not really articulated a clear policy toward China. And
Mhm.
whereas we've seen this willingness to intensify the economic competition with China, President Trump has also signaled his desire to work with President Xi to promote peace and
Yes.
stability. He's used those terms. And I think that because of President Trump's desire not to have the U.S. in a position where it could get dragged into a conflict with China, particularly in terms of a potential contingency in the Taiwan Strait, he may want to make sure that relations with China stay okay. Meanwhile, India, as you know, has been quietly but steadily pursuing its own modest détente with China in recent months, going back to before Trump was reelected. So that suggests that the strategic soundness of the relationship, of the US-India relationship, which was long held to be, sort of self-evident, that of course you have that strong strategic convergence, that might be getting tested a bit right now. And not to mention, I said before that Trump is so much more hard line with his transactionalism than he was in his first term. I think that these considerations, like, tariffs, will, I think, be a higher priority for him than considerations about strategic partnership. I don't think that he and his administration look at foreign policy through a strategic lens. It's through a fully transactional and also a commercial lens.
Yeah, that's right. But then it will, I think, don't you think it will impact the overall geostrategic theater in South Asia and the entire dynamics? Because this might give an impression that USA does not need India anymore to contain China. So
Mhm.
India, uh, at this, because yes, President Trump has not given off a clear policy against China on China, but President Trump has also, White House has criticized India for BRICS and these minilateral alliances that USA feels are there to undercut USA. So there is a feeling of friction, a little friction over there, but not more than that. So this might give an impression that US is changing its policy towards China because it's pulling off its ages old policy on Taiwan as well. So might be China and USA become friend in that scenario. India that has framed itself as the great alternative power in the Asia ever since President Prime Minister Modi has taken power since 2014 especially. So how this entire theater will change then? India, where does India place itself in that theater?
Yeah, I mean, all good points. India has been hedging for quite some time. I think that ever since it became clear that this version of Trump would be very different and even more predictable than the first Trump, India has been, I think, feeling a need to try to ease tensions with China, knowing that it couldn't necessarily trust the U.S. to work with India to push back against China. And again, India had been working with China to ease tensions going back to last fall. There was a border patrolling deal that India signed with China in October last year, which was before the U.S. election. But I think we've seen things pick up a lot since Trump was reelected, and especially since the relationship with the U.S. started to falter. I mean, you have the Indian defense minister and national security advisor in China a few weeks ago for a regional summit. Modi is, as I understand it, going to be going to China soon, first time in quite some time that he's been there. So yeah, I think that India is hedging for sure. I would also argue that Trump's policies toward India, especially the tariffs, it really is it does a big India gain, pardon me, China gains from that. I think that the India-China relationship could get even stronger, which seems hard to believe given what's happened in that relationship going back over the last 5 years. But
Mm.
India and China have a pretty robust commercial partnership, but if India is facing 50% tariffs from such a critical trade partner like the US, it's going to have a strong incentive to look to work more with China commercially. And China would love to do that, despite its tensions with India. China has been saying for many years that it doesn't want the border issue to get in the way of expanding relations across the board. Now that the border has calmed and there's been a deal on the border, I think India is willing to look beyond the border issue as well. China has historically been a key investor in India, including key industries like clean energy, automobiles, and
Yeah.
so China wants to be more involved with that to build more influence and other things. So if the U.S. still feels that countering China is important, well, clearly, the administration is shooting itself in the foot by imposing tariffs on India that will prompt India to work more closely with China, not work with the US to push back against China.
Yeah, and maybe in recent days, I have seen some articles by Indian commentators in Indian news outlets. So there's also this feeling that might be President Trump's administration is not interested in Asia anymore. So it just will let China do whatever in Asia, and America will concentrate elsewhere. Do you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, there might be something to that, but at the same time, my sense is that the Trump administration
Mm.
is quite frankly not really ready to accord much policy attention to the Indo-Pacific and to Asia just yet. It has initial priorities with foreign policy, and those include things like ending wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, focusing on issues, foreign policy issues closer to home. So I don't really think, quite frankly, that the administration has really thought through its policy on the Indo-Pacific. I mean, yes, there have been some things, there have been quad meetings, maybe a big test of this. I mean, to your point, as you know, there is supposed to be a Quad Leader Summit later this year in India. Will Trump go to that? And one would think that even if there's still lingering tensions between the US and India because of the importance of the Quad and its role in the Indo-Pacific strategy, and of course, the Indo-Pacific strategy was first formulated by the first Trump administration, and the Quad was resurrected during the first Trump administration, you'd think that there'd be enthusiasm. But if Trump does not go, if there's no Quad Leader Summit this year, then that I think would strengthen your point. But I do think that in due course, you will see this administration prepared to focus more attention on the Indo-Pacific. I mean, I think that the U.S. does worry at the end of the day about China potentially invading Taiwan or about it doing things in the South China Sea that impact U.S. interests and U.S. assets and so on. So I think that, it would be, in my view, it would be premature to suggest that the US is just closing itself off from Asia, not to mention the major economic and commercial opportunities in Asia.
Mm. Mm. That sounds logical. And so let's turn our attention to Pakistan now. General Asim Munir's visit, Field Marshal, now Asim Munir's visit to the White House was, I think, remarkable, especially since Pakistan's military has, often been quiet about powerful players in the, country's diplomacy. But this kind of direct and public reception by the US president, it's quite unusual. Is this simply a short-term tactical embrace? shaped by post-conflict diplomacy with India, etc., or the beginning of a longer-term, you think, re-engagement between Washington and Rawalpindi, not Islamabad?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's a strategic realignment just because, as I think I said before, this administration does not look at foreign policy and diplomacy through strategic lenses. Everything is transactional. And I
Hmm.
think that when this administration, this president look at their relations with other countries, it's not about what works best for strategic goals, what works best for our interests. It's about what can we be offered? What can we get out of this? And here, I think Pakistan has been very successful. I think that Pakistan, the generals, and also the civilian leaders deserve credit because they have played the game in a way that can work in Trump's Washington. They have essentially, Pakistan has positioned itself as a useful partner to Washington in terms of being willing to work and cooperate with the U.S. on the issues that are of most importance to the U.S. across the world, not just in Pakistan. So, we know that this administration is very interested in critical minerals. Well, Pakistan has hosted this major global mineral investment forum several months ago, and you had a senior U.S. government presence there. Pakistan knows this administration wants to work on crypto issues. Pakistan had nothing going on with crypto until a few weeks after the Trump administration came back to power, and suddenly you have a crypto council. And then you have this plan to start legalizing crypto. Pakistan knows that the U.S., though it doesn't want to be involved in wars and military operations, it is interested in doing what it has to do to track down terrorists that threaten the U.S. Pakistan has projected itself as the partner that can help the U.S. with that, given that it borders Afghanistan and can keep an eye on ISK terrorists in Pakistan that threaten the U.S. And then most recently, oil, energy, right? I mean, when Pakistan knows that this administration is interested in in uh, in oil and in energy development and so on. So conveniently, Pakistan last year had announced a new oil and gas find, a massive oil and gas find. And so it likely made sure that people close to Trump were reminded about that find, and that clearly intrigued the administration and likely prompted it to want to sign that oil development deal with India, with Pakistan last week. So basically, this is all commercial, it's all transactional. It's not necessarily going to continue, right? I mean, once the U.S. realizes that there's a lot of obstacles on all these fronts, the critical minerals are in areas of Pakistan very prone to terrorism. Crypto is very much a work in progress in Pakistan. We don't know how much of these oil reserves have been confirmed. It's a lot of probable oil reserves. And then counterterrorism, the U.S. is, in my view, I don't think the Trump administration is going to want to start sending guns and money back to the Pakistani military, which is what the establishment would like. So, it's momentum, it's a renaissance, it's an unexpected renaissance in relations, but it's not necessarily something that's going to endure. And not to mention, we know that President Trump is notoriously fickle and mercurial. He may decide that, all of these things that might seem attractive now might not seem as attractive several months down the road.
Yeah, but you see, Pakistan's military establishment, more than the money at this time, they are interested, I think, in reputational repair. So, President Trump's attention and the West's overall attention to Pakistan and Middle Eastern attention to Pakistan gives them an opportunity to rebrand itself as the country that is important for counterterrorism rather than a country that harbors terrorists, that India would have the world believe. What do you think about this? Is this rebranding, working, or it's again just the transactional thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works to an extent, in part because of how things played out during the India-Pakistan conflict, right? India's view is that the Pahalgam attack that triggered the crisis and eventually the conflict was sponsored by Pakistan, or was carried out by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists, and that there are links to Pakistan. And yet the international community, it didn't really, that was not the narrative that you heard from capitals around the world during the crisis. The narrative was about needing to de-escalate because of concerns about nuclear escalation risks. So India was hoping that it could use that conflict to try to focus more U.S. attention on the problem of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. But that's not what happened. Um, I do think, though, that most countries, particularly in the West, do still sympathize with India when it talks about these concerns about Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. And you had these Indian delegations that were in the U.S. and many other capitals around the world. And I think it is notable that I think the delegation in Washington at one point made the point that India's fight against terrorism, Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, it's not just India's fight, it's the world's fight. And I think that resonates just because it's important for, governments that might not understand Pakistan well to remember that, the likes of Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and so on, they don't only target India. The Mumbai attacks, of course, in 2008, there were a number of fatalities, including from the United States. So I think that message helps. But yeah, I think things are going pretty well for the Pakistani military and the generals at the moment. And you don't have people in Washington and London and other key capitals going around warning about this terrible problem with Pakistan sponsoring terrorists. I mean, this was happening during the Afghanistan war years. One reason for that is that U.S. troops were getting targeted by the likes of the Haqqani network, whereas we have a very different situation right now. So basically, I think to your point, Pakistan has benefited. I mean, there is still that sympathy that India will get on that position, but I don't think this is a priority agenda point for the U.S. and for other countries not going into meetings with Pakistani officials, pushing them to address this problem. And
Yeah,
that clearly is a victory for Pakistan.
yeah. And then Michael, I think the world has, I would like to know your view on that. I think the world has moved on from this terrorism narrative, one, because of the factors that you have very eloquently described. And I would just add to it that, Al Qaeda is broken now. US has been successful against Al Qaeda. Taliban, well, US is trying to work with Taliban, and they are in Afghanistan. Even India is trying to work with them, and Pakistan is an important conduit to do that. Other kind of terrorism that you see in the world, there is very little footprint of Pakistan. Actually, none, non-existent. Pakistan actually is handing over terrorists left, right, and center to different countries. It has done to USA, to Turkey, to Malaysia. So Pakistan is successfully rebranding itself as a country that hands over terrorists, not the country that produces terrorists. And
Hmm.
ISIS, the major terror threat comes from ISIS in throughout the world. Pakistan is itself fighting the ISIS. Pakistan cannot be, I mean, so far we don't see Pakistan harboring ISIS. As far as Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed are concerned, during the Al Qaeda days, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish, etc., they were working with them and other, the Central Asian groups, the Uzbeks, etc. They were working together, but now the successfully that has been, you know, uh, I won't say eliminated, but successfully decimated that kind of connection. Now it's just India-centric terrorism, terror operations that Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed do with different names. TRF might be one of the branches. Now probably that is the reason why India has not been able to convince the world that it's still Pakistan that produces this terror, because the world does not see it that way.
Yeah, and I think these are all good points. And, another factor that I think helps Pakistan in this narrative game is that its position is that, these India-focused terrorists are essentially no longer in Pakistan. Pakistan's official position is that Jaish and what's left of it is based in Afghanistan now. So that's essentially takes the onus off Pakistan and puts it on Afghanistan, or India for that matter. It claims that the Lashkar-e-Taiba is not there. It rejects the allegation that these Kashmir militants, including the Resistance Front, is linked to LET, which of course is India's position. And you're not seeing a tremendous amount of pushback from the international community on
Yeah.
this front. I mean, certainly they're focused on other things as well. But yeah, I think that you're right. And there's also the issue that Pakistan is a victim of terrorism, and it has been for many years. And if you look at how things are playing out in Pakistan now, we've seen this resurgence of TTP
Mm.
attacks, and the BLA is also carrying out rising numbers of attacks, hitting the Pakistani security forces hard. Sometimes Pakistani civilians get hit hard as well. And I think one could argue that the accurate way to articulate this, and many have, is that Pakistan is both a victim and a perpetrator, or at least a sponsor of terrorism over time. But given what's playing out in Pakistan now, you have Pakistan getting hit hard by terrorism, and I think that enables Pakistan to center the narrative around the victim dimension, the victim dimension, that it's a victim of terrorism, that it seeks cooperation and partnership with friends, including the U.S., to address these terrorism issues and these terrorism concerns. Pakistan, of course, as you know, also blames India for sponsoring the terrorists that carry out attacks in Pakistan, TTP and BLA.
That's right.
That also shapes the narrative. Now, that aspect of the narrative has not historically gotten much traction in Washington and elsewhere. But this is a position that Pakistan has brought to the fore a lot, all again meant to center this idea around Pakistan as a victim of terrorism and as a country that's looking to confront terrorism, not as a country that is sponsoring or enabling terrorism.
Yeah, that's true. But Michael, I think if we recall Canada's allegations against India of transnational repression, and which were backed by FBI back then, before when President Biden was there, uh, and FBI hasn't backed out from that position. Uh, uh, just yesterday, we covered a transnational repression report that was presented to UK Parliament on 30th of July, in which India and Pakistan both are named, and actually India is above Pakistan at number four, only after China, Iran, and Russia. So, do you think these allegations of exporting repression and violence on this foreign soil by India, these allegations that are coming from Western countries are helping Pakistan's allegations of, framing India also as the exporter of terror?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been hearings here in Washington on Capitol Hill focused on transnational repression, and historically, one would think that that type of hearing on that type of subject on Capitol Hill would focus on Russia, would focus on China, would focus on Iran, and so on. But India is now a focus of those hearings, and it has been. But I would say this as well, and this sort of gets to this issue of Trump and his administration being so, it's hard to figure, hard to analyze. The Trump administration has actually sympathized with India's position on the issue of Khalistan
Mhm.
much more than the Biden administration did. So there have been a number of arrests that the FBI has made of Khalistan supporters, and they're arrested on charges tied to organized crime, drug trafficking. But in many cases, these are individuals that are wanted in India and accused of plotting or supporting terrorism, Khalistan, that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
amid all the craziness happening in the U.S.-India relationship, you very quietly have the U.S. addressing what has been a critical core Indian grievance and one of the big tension points in the U.S.-India relationship during the Biden administration. Now it's no longer the case. So, broadly speaking, I do think that the transnational repression issue is something that undercuts Indian narratives and it helps Pakistan. But the interesting thing is that this administration has sympathized with India on its position. It has essentially, if not taken India's position, it's sympathized with India's position that the U.S. has not been doing enough to target these individuals that pose threats to India's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have come to the last segment of which is so in May, when India attacked Pakistan, we saw this, the renewed emphasis on Pakistan in China. China helped Pakistan, and India is still reverberating with echoes of we are facing two front, three front war, not just with Pakistan but Pakistan, China, and now their army chief was saying that Bangladesh as well. So China and Pakistan are being seen as one, and the relationship in the world's eyes is strengthened after that. Although in my eyes it has always been quite strong, but you see, it is gelled. It is quite strong. It has steeled itself. Now look at what is happening between President Trump and the army chief, Pakistan's army chief. How do you reconcile with them? How does China reconcile with that? How does US, I mean, USA we have talked about, but do you think China would approve, China has approved of that? Or Pakistan affords to alienate China because it wants that bonhomie with President Trump? What is happening there?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting point. I mean, I'm not an expert on China's foreign policy, so I can't give a definitive answer on this, but it is notable that Beijing's official position is that it wants Pakistan to have good relations with both China and the US, which of course is Pakistan's position, that it values its relations with both the US and China, that it wants to balance those relations. Yeah, I don't think that Beijing is terribly upset about this U.S.-Pakistan renaissance, and it might indeed see some advantages, particularly as it sees these signals from Trump's Washington about wanting to get along better, about the U.S. wanting to get along better with China. And I think that Beijing also recognizes that the China-Pakistan alliance is a fail-safe partnership. No matter what's happening with the U.S. and Pakistan, it's not going to imperil or undercut that relationship. And more importantly, it's not going to undercut China's leverage over Pakistan, which remains quite high because of the reliance that Pakistan has on Chinese economic and military assistance. As I think I said before, the U.S. is not going to start sending guns and money to Pakistan. It's certain, given what the U.S. has done with foreign aid and USAID, it's not going to start sending significant amounts of economic and development assistance to Pakistan. So that ensures that Beijing will continue to have that leverage over Pakistan, which is important for Beijing and important for its interests. So yeah, I think that given how things are now, given the current geopolitical moment, I don't think that these gains in U.S.-Pakistan relations are going to upset China that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. Because there were, some, as I talked about gossip chambers in DC, there are gossip chambers of Islamabad as well. So there
Yeah.
was this, whisper going around in from Islamabad that China has given its tacit approval to Pakistan to go ahead with whatever it is doing with the USA. So lastly, after the Israel-Iran conflict last month, there was this Pakistan's army announced that it will recommend President Trump for Nobel Prize and 24 Nobel Peace Prize because of his efforts to you know, peace efforts between Pakistan and India. 24 hours after that, US bombed Iran. And even during those times, Pakistan and President Trump had, that bonhomie kept going. But last week, we have seen Iran's president coming to Pakistan and having this warm welcome, very high profile reception events, and all of that. Make it make sense for us because there was a lot of gossip going around, whispers going around that Pakistan has actually helped USA getting key intelligence from Iran that has helped USA bomb Iran, whatever. Most of it, I understand, keeps being gossip. But what is your view? How do we make sense of it? Is Pakistan really trying to mediate between Iran and USA, or is this is something other than that?
Yeah, so of course I'm not privy to the gossip chambers in either Islamabad or Washington or New Delhi or Beijing or anywhere for that matter. So I can't speak to some of these speculations, but I do think that one of the various reasons why we're seeing this improvement for now in U.S.-Pakistan ties is Washington's view that Pakistan can be helpful as a mediator vis-a-vis Iran. And it's true that we've seen significant levels of high-level engagement between Pakistan and Iran in the weeks leading up to the Iran-Israel war and the weeks
Mhm.
after. And as you say, Iran's president is in Pakistan this week. But the question is, what could Pakistan actually do as a mediator? Right? I mean, Pakistan, it has a good warm relationship with Iran, but it doesn't have huge amounts of leverage over Iran.
Mm.
Pakistan, of course, continues to have very special close ties with Iran's Arab Gulf rivals, particularly the Saudis and the UAE and Qatar and so on. So I think that where Pakistan was potentially helpful and could continue to potentially be helpful is to try to press uh, Iran to exert restraint
Mm.
and to try to make the case that, the Middle East is already in a very difficult, volatile, conflicted spot, and that Tehran's interests, Islamabad's interests, interest of friends around the region are not served by Iran staging provocations. And so I'm not sure how far Pakistan will be willing to go with this message, but, it could potentially try to sort of bring the point to its Iranian interlocutors that it makes a lot, it's not a good thing to try to encourage, it's not a good thing for Iran to encourage its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and all, to stir things up given how bad things already are. Again, I'm not sure how comfortable Pakistan would feel going that far, but I do think that the message of restraint is
Mm.
one that the Pakistanis could convey. And we heard during the course of the Israel-Iran conflict that, we heard Pakistani officials, including the army chief, talking about that, their view that, want to see the war end and so on. So I think that's perhaps where Pakistan can be helpful. Would not want to overstate it, but I do think, and everyone trying to think about how did Munir manage to get that White House lunch? Many reasons for it. But again, he had been in Tehran just a few weeks before, and maybe the president was curious to hear out his impressions about what he heard when he was in Tehran. A number of the people he met with were killed in the conflict, but
Mm.
that could have been useful for the president, for President Trump. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't overstate this mediation role that Pakistan can play vis-a-vis Iran. And of course, Pakistan does not have formal relations with Israel. There have been, as I'm sure you know, there's been some really interesting scholarship on this, a number of informal links between Pakistani civilian and military officials and Israel over the decades. There have been a few informal encounters, but no formal relations. Pakistan has a hostile relationship to Israel, and I think that Pakistan's value as a mediator vis-a-vis Iran would be much higher if it also had a relationship with Israel, but it doesn't have any relationship with Israel, much less a good one.
Yeah, that's true. But between USA and Iran, because you see, Iran has there's no other country that has Iran's ears, so to speak. Iran's parliament was, there were loud slogans raised by Iranian parliaments during the conflict, calling Pakistan Zindabad, Pakistan,
Right.
thank you, Pakistan. So this kind of relationship that, and I understand what you are saying because in Pakistan army as well, they're not in Pakistan on the whole, the society is, if you look at it, not many pro-Iran voices you would see. The army military is not a pro-Iran institution. It's like
Right.
things have changed over the decades. So yeah, you are right. But then there might be something that Pakistan could do between US and Iran. But anyway, that we'll have to see. We'll have to close our show, our episode today here. I would thank you, Michael. What we have heard today, beyond the gossip chambers and whispers, there's both a symbolism and substance in what is unfolding. The White House handshake with Pakistan's top general, the tariffs slapped on Indian exports, the rhetoric blaming India for helping Russia. These are not random outbursts. They, as our guest has also explained various factors, they reflect tensions that could reshape the US engagement with South Asia, Indo-Pacific, as Michael has said, for maybe years to come, or maybe let's see in months to come. Whether this is a true pivot or just a transactional moment, it remains to be seen. But what's clear is that India and Pakistan are no longer occupying the same spaces in Washington's strategic imagination for now, at this particular moment. And the consequences could be, you know, important, profound, not just for bilateral ties, but for the entire region's political balance, energy security, democratic trajectory, etc. So, Michael, thank you once again for your time, your analysis, and for helping us connect all these dots that compose quite a complex picture. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in. If you found this conversation informative, don't forget to subscribe to Unravel. Share this video with your networks, with your friends, and leave your thoughts in the pinned comments below. Do you think President Trump's shift is a long-term strategy, or is it driven purely by short-term optics? And how should India and Pakistan respond to this reordering of US priorities? Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and keep unraveling. Have a good one.